Namaste, good morning, and welcome to the Vedanta Society of Greater Houston and our Sunday service. Tam agnivarnam tapasa jwalantim vairochanim karma phaleshu jushtaam Durgan Devi Gum Sharanamaham Prapadye Sutarasi Tarase Namaha. To her who is of the color of fire and blazing with tapas, spiritual energy, who was born of that fire and who is worshipped through the fruits of action, to that Durga, to that goddess, I take refuge by falling at her feet. O Mother Durga, we prostrate before you. Ferry us mercifully over the ocean of this world. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Om peace, peace, peace be unto us all. So this morning I'm going to speak about Mother Durga in honor of the fact that we are entering into the season of the worship of Mother Durga. We're coming close to the celebration of Navaratri and the 9 sacred nights, which is celebrated all over India, but in different parts of India celebrated in different ways. In some parts of India, the Ram Leela is reenacted, the story of Rama, and especially his return to Ayodhya. Or his vanquishing of Ravana, the demon, and recapturing of Sita. And in some places, Saraswati is especially worshipped. But in Bengal, Mother Durga, that is one of the aspects of the Divine Mother known as Durga, is worshipped. And wherever Bengali culture has spread along with the community, the worship of Durga has spread as well. And since our tradition, the Ramakrishna tradition, was born in Bengal, and the worship of Mother Durga was very much present among the disciples, with Ramakrishna himself, with the Holy Mother, and among the disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, it has become an important celebration in our tradition as well. And so let me say, parenthetically, before I continue with the talk on Mother Durga, that in the Vedanta tradition, one doesn't need to accept any god or goddess. One can seek just for truth. The idea of gods and goddesses is an option. The idea of rituals, of puja and offering worship, that also is an option. One need not be ritualistic. One need not believe in gods and goddesses. One need not accept the ancient stories and so forth. Vedanta is essentially the search for truth. But the pantheon of Hindu deities is also an option, and the performance of rituals is an option. So again, not necessary, but many find it a natural part of their spiritual life, not just for those born and brought up in India. Of course, for many of them, unless they were strongly influenced by groups like the Arya Samaj and other groups, the worship of deities is a part of life and a natural part of life for most Hindus. Again, unless they were brought up in one of the reform movements which did away with deity worship and the worship of images and so forth. It's a natural part. But in outside of India as well, many people have a natural response. After an initial shock of finding a very different way of looking at God with the various deities of Hinduism, there are many who take to that aspect of Hinduism as well. I remember end of 1981, when I was returning from India after living for 7 years in India, I stopped in Germany to visit a friend who lived on an island in the Baltic Sea that belonged to Germany, Fehmarn. He lived on a farm there. And his mother, who at that time was 80 years old, she's long since passed away, of course, but at that time she was 80, and she was a Hatha Yoga teacher. And so she taught the local farmers Hatha Yoga. As my friend would say, it was very funny to watch her yoga sessions with these big, burly German farmers practicing yoga. And of course, they work hard in the fields all day. And so they would come to the yoga class, and she would get them so relaxed that you would hear the farmers snoring in the yoga class. But I bring her up because she was a German woman. But she had met Swami Ritujananda ji in France, our Swami in France, and had become his disciple. And she had a great love for Ganesha. And so in her home, she had images of Ganesha everywhere. She collected images of Ganesha, pictorial, statues, everything, anything associated with the Ganesha, she had all over her house. And there are many who take to the idea of Kali or Shiva or Krishna, etc. A story I've told here before, long back, one of our devotees in Trabuco, a very ordinary in every sense, not in any bad sense, but in the sense of being just a sort of the image of the standard American without any influence from anything outside of America. Grew up very much American, very much identified with everything American. Ordinary education and everything, not cosmopolitan or sophisticated in any way, but a very good man. He heard about Vedanta and was interested in what he heard. It was intriguing about the belief that all religions are true and that it was a search for truth and so forth. So he wanted to find out more. And living in Southern California, near Los Angeles, he found the address of the Vedanta Society of Southern California. So he called. He got the phone number from in those days there was the phone book, the white pages. He found the phone number and called the society. And whoever answered, obviously didn't inquire to find out who this man was or what it was he was looking for. Because when he asked about finding out more about Vedanta, she said, yes, we're having the worship of Mother. We're having the worship of Mother on such and such a night. And that was Kali Puja, which is a big thing in Hollywood. And so she invited him to come to Kali Puja. He had no idea what that was. He just thought it was, something to do with Vedanta, which he had been intrigued by with just a little bit he'd read. So he comes to Kali Puja and sees this black goddess holding a severed head and a sword, and then a jackal underneath, ready to lick the blood falling from the head, and everybody bowing down in front of this idol and singing, and people, some people getting up and dancing and things. He was completely, as we say in American English, he was completely freaked out. He thought, this is the strangest thing I've ever seen. This seems diabolical. This is something that's so disturbing that after a while he got up and left. But for the next week, it bothered him so much. He kept thinking about this horrible thing that he had seen, and this people bowing before an idol and all of that, and that too, a terrible-looking goddess. He couldn't get it out of his head. So by the next weekend, he thought, I've got to resolve this. I've got to come to some resolution. This is too much. I can't bear it. So he found out that there was a Sunday service at the society. So he thought, I've got to confront this and just get it out of my system. So he goes back to the Vedanta Society. And I believe it was Swami Vandanananda ji, who was at that time assistant to Swami Prabhavananda, who was giving the lecture, and he was an excellent speaker. And he was one of those swamis who had the ability to speak in terms that a Western audience, because in those days all of our audiences were all Western, that a Western audience could relate to very easily. And so the man who went there just to get this diabolical, horrible thing out of his system by confronting it, he was completely charmed. And then he became a lifelong devotee, he and his wife both. So, and they became very much devoted to Mother Kali as well. And there are other stories about how people from a very ordinary American background with nothing to give them any special sophistication or anything, have in a similar way encountered Hindu deities and fallen in love with them. And so, again, there's some both Americans and people of Indian origin as well, who want nothing to do with deities, and that's fine. You don't need to have anything to do with deities. I'll just mention one other story as it comes to mind. When I was in San Diego, there was a Southern Baptist minister that came because for many years, he had kept a book by Swami Paramananda on his bedside table, one of two books he kept. He was a retired Southern Baptist minister. Turns out that some of my relatives used to go to his church in Atlanta decades before. And the story I'm telling is from the 1980s. And so he came because of this interest in Swami Paramananda, and then he got interested in hearing the classes and lectures. He came initially just to see if we had that book because his was worn out from so much reading. And then he got interested in other things, and eventually he wanted to become a member of the Vedanta Society. But he asked me the time he came to see me, to ask if he could become a member and what he needed to do. And I explained membership and everything to him. And then pointing to the shrine back in the back of the building, he said, "I don't have to have anything to do with that, do I?" I said, "No, you don't have to have anything to do with that. You never have to go back there. You don't have to have anything to do with it. If you just like the teachings, that's all you need. That's the essence of what we teach. All the rest is just extra for those who like it." So, again, that's all one needs to be a Vedantin, is a desire to seek the truth, with the idea that truth may be spiritual, and I want to I want to know if there is such a truth, and if there is, what it is. So, but today, again, I'm speaking on Durga, the Divine Mother, one of the deities of India, and one who is especially worshipped at this time of year in the autumn. And in our tradition, as I said at the beginning, she is very prominent in our tradition in certain ways, because Sri Ramakrishna himself, if you read the gospel, there are several times when he went to see the worship of Mother Durga at different devotees' houses, and he would go into ecstasy. And then even when he was in Dakshineshwar and surrounded by devotees during the time of Durga Puja, sitting in his room, when the most holy period of the Durga Puja, Sandhi Puja, comes, then suddenly, without his knowing what time it was, because he didn't have a wristwatch or anything like that. In those days, wristwatches were only the westernized middle and upper middle classes that had such things. So without knowing what time it was, right at the moment when Sandhi Puja happens, and that time changes from year to year, according to astronomical calculations, suddenly he went into samadhi and remained in samadhi during that period of the Sandhi Puja. And so there are many references to that. And then I was surprised to learn that the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, they actually started Durga Puja in Baranagore after Sri Ramakrishna passed away, and they established the Baranagore monastery, which was so poor that they didn't even have food to eat. They sometimes just had rice and picked some wild greens from the weeds. There are certain greens that are edible, just like here. There are a number of greens that grow as weeds here that are quite edible, and actually some of them are quite good. So they would pick the wild greens and cook them, and that's all they had with the rice. Sometimes nothing but salt with the rice. And so they're extremely poor, but they started Durga Puja in Baranagore, and that I just recently read in the reminiscences of Holy Mother, where she mentions that they started the Durga Puja at Baranagore. I knew about the later establishment of the formal Durga Puja. At Baranagore, it would not have been in a large image. It would have been just in a picture, or maybe just in a pot of water, ceremonially, ritually established as a symbol of the Divine Mother. But it would have been in a simple way. But later, once Bellarmut, many years later, when Bellarmut was purchased and the monastery was established, Swamiji one day came to Swami Brahmananda and said, we must begin the worship of Mother Durga, meaning establish the formal worship of Mother Durga here every year. And Swami Brahmananda, before Swamiji had come and told him that, he had seen in a vision Mother Durga walking across the Ganges towards Bellarmut. And so when Swamiji told him that, then he knew that, yes, Mother Durga will be worshipped here. And so that worship continues every year in Bellarmut. It's a beautiful worship. People from all over come to see it at Bellarmut. Tens of thousands of people come during the Durga Puja to see it. And at the time of the Kumari Puja, on the 8th day, the Ashtami, the 8th day of the 9 days, the Divine Mother is worshipped in the form of a young girl. And so a living young girl, a girl from among the devotees is selected by the president of the order and is worshipped as the Divine Mother. And then there's the Bellarmut is just a sea of humanity who come to see the Kumari Puja. It's an extraordinarily beautiful ceremony where a living young girl, 6 or 7, is worshipped as the Divine Mother. And so it's a huge celebration there. In Bengal and in Calcutta, the largest city in Bengal, there are Durga Pujas everywhere. It seems like practically every corner in the huge metropolitan area, every corner has a pandal, a big tent with the Durga Puja being celebrated. So there are countless Durga Pujas in the area at that time, but many people come to Bellarmut because we do it in the traditional way. Now there's a fashion in Bengal of making various themed Durga Pujas. And often the image, instead of the traditional image of the goddess, they'll make it to look like a favorite movie star. and it's very social. Sometimes it's rowdy, but always very social. But at Bellarmut, everything is done according to the strict tradition, but in a very beautiful, in a measured way, but in a very beautiful way. And everyone knows that there is a special power at that time. You feel it in the very atmosphere of the grounds. You feel that Mother has come. That's the idea behind Durga Puja, that Mother has come from her home in the Himalayas where she lives with Shiva, the transcendent reality. She, the Divine Mother, the creative force, lives with the transcendent reality. And the two are actually one being, but Mother is the creative aspect and Shiva is the transcendent, absorbed in samadhi aspect. And so the story is that she comes down from the Himalayas to her parental home, as is done in Bengali families. After the marriage, the daughter will come back from time to time to the parental home for a visit. And so she comes back. And so one's home, or in this case, our temple, is seen to be the parental home where she's coming back to visit. So everyone welcomes her to come to see, welcomes her into the home as the young bride returning from her husband in the Himalayas. And so it's a beautiful ceremony. It's the closest thing in the Indian tradition I've seen to the spirit of Christmas. Every celebration in the Hindu tradition is a joyous celebration. I haven't seen any that are somber and sad and morose and so forth, only funeral ceremonies, but those are not specifically the worship of God. Those are mourning for the person who has passed away. But other than a funeral ceremony, I haven't seen any celebrations in the Hindu tradition that are morose. But of all of the celebrations, Durga Puja is the closest in spirit to Christmas. Even writing cards to friends and family is a big part of it. Though here we send Christmas cards before Christmas, and there you send the cards after the Durga Puja. Then even the colors, red is very much used, as red is associated with Christmas here. Here, Christmas is associated with red and green. There's a lot of green because of the green nature of the natural environment in Bengal, but much of the red color, which is associated with the Divine Mother. and people put on new clothes. Even this beggar family that I have been taking care of for many years in the village of Belur, even they always ask for new clothes for Durga Puja. They say, Maharaj, Puja is coming, can we have new saris? So again, it's a wonderful and beautiful time, and it's a time when nature itself is very prasanna, very pleased. Nature is harmonious. It's after the terrible heat of the Bengal summers, terrible heat and humidity, very much like Houston and the worst of the summer in Houston without air conditioning. So if you imagine Houston without air conditioning, that's like the summer in Bengal. Except that here we don't have monsoon rains, and there they have torrential rains from the late June, usually until early September. And so this celebration comes either in late September or early October, last half of September, first half of October, depending on the year, the way the Indian calendar works. But it comes at that time when the intense heat has gone. It's still hot by most standards, especially people who are used to living in air conditioning. But it's not at all hot like it was in May and June and during the summer. And the rains have washed all of the smoke and dust and everything out of the air. So the air is crisp and the sky is blue and clean. The air is unusually clean. Flowers are in bloom, the autumn flowers. The earth is washed clean because of the rains. And again, the terrible heat is gone. And so it's a naturally beautiful time. And that is the time when Durga is especially worshipped. So the rest of the time, I want to tell about the story of the Chandi. The Chandi is a text, the Devi Mahatmyam, the greatness of the Devi, also known as the Devi Saptashati, the 700 verses on the goddess. It's a text, which is read especially during the time of Durga Puja. Durga Puja is not complete unless there is the reading of the Chandi. But there are many people who read the Chandi every day. Some of you knew Swami Tathagatanandaji, a great Swami who passed away a few years ago. He was the previous head of the Vedanta Society of New York before Swami Sarvapriyananda. And so he used to read the Chandi every morning. And so there are people who read the whole of it every day. Some people read parts of it every day, and they'll finish it in the course of a week and then read it again the next week, part by part, day by day. It's a text which is at first, to those who are not brought up in the Hindu tradition, it's a shocking text because it doesn't read like normal scriptures. It tells about the Divine Mother battling demons, and it's full of blood and gore. And so at first it's a shocking text. But it's said that by the reading of this text, one develops heroic strength. Because, as Swami Vivekananda said, the way to read a mythological text is to read the story and let the effect wash over one. That is, it's not to analyze it. Analysis has its place. Analysis has its good place. That is to think about what different things mean and what is this, what is that, why do they say this, why do they say that, etc. But the real effect comes by just reading the story and feeling it, identifying with the story, letting the story wash over you. And then the effect of it is what is really wanted. And so after the analysis and figuring out what is what and all of that, then just the reading of it brings great strength. When I was going to Ridgely Manor to take charge of a new project, which was an extraordinarily difficult project, a very, very difficult project. And Swami Swahanandaji was sending me there at the behest of the headquarters, Belramat. He knew that it was going to be a very difficult project, so he told me to read chapter 4 of the Chandi every day to gain strength. Or one could read the whole thing, but at least read chapter 4 every day. So it's a beautiful text, But it's one that, again, when one is used to certain scriptures like the Gita and the Upanishads, then you come to the Chandi and you think, my God, what kind of scripture is this? It's often compared to the Gita, not because it's similar to the Gita in form or similar in the way teachings are presented, because in the Gita, Sri Krishna teaches about spiritual truth. He teaches about what is the nature of the universe, what is the nature of the self of every being, what is the nature of the divine source of this universe, what is the nature of the incarnation of God, how can one practice in order to attain to that realization. So it's full of practical teachings addressed to Arjuna, but through Arjuna directly to us. This is the nature of truth. This is what you do if you want to attain control of the mind. And so it's very transparent teaching of truth. But here it's story. And again, the story takes several stories in one, all about the Divine Mother, but the stories take a strange form. But it is comparable to the Gita, not just because the size is similar. This is 700 verses, and the Gita, I forget, is somewhere around there. It's 700 and something verses. The size is similar, but as the Gita, the main teaching in the Gita, all through all of the Gita, the continual refrain is one of non-attachment. And so here also the continual refrain is one of non-attachment. Throughout the Gita, from the beginning to the end, there's the emphasis on strength, the necessity for for being strong, for standing up and fighting, meaning standing up and facing life, not running from life, but confronting life, confronting every situation. And this also, by talking about the Divine Mother's strength, it calls up our own strength. Swami Swahananda used to have certain funny expressions which he had learned as a boy in English class, but expressions which long fell out of vogue in modern English. But so they sounded very quaint and funny to us Americans, and so he would say these expressions and everyone would laugh, and so then he continued expressing them because he got a good response for saying them. So he used to say frequently, when talking about Durga or Kali, he would say, what kind of mother do you want? Do you want a namby-pamby mother? Or do you want a strong mother? So Durga is not a namby-pamby mother. She's a heroic mother, one who destroys the evil forces, who destroys obstacles, and who protects those who are devoted to her. And so the reading of this gives strength. The reading of the Gita also gives strength, but there it's through direct teaching. Be strong. This is why you should be strong, because you are eternal, and so forth. This gives strength just because the stories call up strength. And so again, the effect of the Chandi is from the reading of it. And so in the Chandi, it begins as in a similar way to many texts in India. It says Markandeya. Markandeya was a great sage. And the Chandi is part of the Markandeya Purana, the holy book, which was related by the sage Markandeya. So the Chandi is just one small part of this much larger work. So it says, Markandeya said to his disciple, Savarni, the son of Surya, the actual sun, is called the eighth Manu. And I'll explain this in a moment very simply. Listen while I describe in detail about his birth. How Savarni, illustrious son of the sun, became the lord of the eighth cycle, Manvantara, by the grace of Mahamaya. So, in simple terms, what this is saying is, as oftentimes the Hindu texts do, especially the post-Vedic texts, it begins from the large and the vast. It says, here how Savarni is the name of the eighth Manu. Now, the Manu is the first sage who is the lawgiver, who establishes the sort of rules of the cosmic game for each cycle of creation. So each cycle of creation has its own Manu. So it says that the Manu who is in the eighth cycle, who was known as Savarni. So again, one Manu lives for billions of years and is the overseer for billions of years. Not Brahma the creator, but under Brahma the creator is the lawgiver. So hear how this Manu, in the second cycle, was born as a king, Surata. So again, it takes us from the cosmic, from these speaking in terms of billions of years, how the cosmic lawgiver Manu, how he became the cosmic lawgiver of the eighth cycle, when he was born in the second cycle, again countless billions of years ago, as the earthly king Surata. This is, again, one of the beauties of the Hindu conception, very different from the Abrahamic conception of the universe, where the universe was very small, the earth was the center of it, and if you calculate according to the Bible, Old Testament and New Testament of the Christians, then the earth was created something like 6,000 years ago. But the Hindu conception was of billions of years and endless cycles of billions of years and vast space with many different worlds, even different universes and so forth. So this idea of the vastness of nature. So the scriptures often begin from this vastness and then come to the particular. I brought the Ribhu Gita along just to illustrate that from a verse I'm very fond of, which has nothing to do with Durga, but it does have to do with Ganesha. And so the first verse of the first chapter of the Ribhu Gita, which, by the way, is a text on uncompromising non-dualism. It was Ramana Maharshi was very fond of this. It says in translation, "May the Lord Mahaganapati," that is Ganesha, the great Ganapati, the great Ganesha, who joyously holds the Mount Meru as if it were a strawberry. So the Mount Meru is the axis of the whole universe, a vast mountain, which is the universe spins around Mount Meru. And so Ganesha is so big that he sees Mount Meru as just a strawberry, which he's plucking. And the celestials begin to cry out in fear because the whole universe will be destroyed if he plucks Mount Meru, the axis of the world. And so then he's distracted, who then being pleaded to by the frightened celestials, lets go of it, only to capture the blue expanse of the whole sky, thinking it to be a blueberry. So this idea of the vastness of the universe being reduced because of the larger vastness of the infinite reality, being reduced to something tiny. So again, you get this sense of vast expanse, and that you get all through the Chandi, with the Divine Mother fighting against hundreds of crores, that is, billions of chariots fighting arrayed against her, hurling spears and arrows and so forth, and she's fighting. So again, this idea of the vast expanses of time and space, which you get in the Hindu scriptures. So again, it begins by telling the story of Surata, a king who lost a battle to his enemies. And after losing the battle, as if that were not enough, then his own ministers began to cheat him and steal and rob and take over power. And so he's so undone by the crumbling of his kingdom and the betrayal by his own ministers and members of his court, that he pretends to be going off on a hunting trip because, of course, he has to keep his dignity. He's the king. But he knows that he's really no longer a king because he's been defeated and now everyone has mutinied against him. So he gets on his horse and goes off into the forest telling people he's going for a hunting trip. But there he comes to the ashrama of the sage Medhas Muni, a sage who lived in an ashrama in the forest. And there he meets a merchant, Samadhi, named Samadhi. And Samadhi was a merchant whose family had turned against him. His family had stolen everything from him and kicked him out. He had worked faithfully for the welfare of his family, and yet his family cared nothing for him. They kicked him out unceremoniously. That's not at all an exaggeration. That actually happens. I have a dear friend Vedanta friend, who was married for many years, had a daughter, and a daughter grew up. He had cared for them, he provided for them, he lived in Mexico for many years, had a tortilla factory that he supported them with, then came to this country to take care of his father, and his father left him his house, which was the only thing he had. He was always poor, and his father was not wealthy, but his father owned his own house. And so his father left him with the house, and he had a little money from the factory and so forth. And then his wife and daughter both turned against him and tricked him into turning over the property to them, and then he lost everything. They kept all of everything he had. He was penniless, without property, his own daughter and wife that he had taken care of and that he had tried to provide for. And so he came to the monastery Trabuco weeping, saying that I've lost everything. And so Swami Atmarupananda, the Swami at that time in charge, the artist whom some of you know of, who painted beautiful paintings of Ramakrishna, Holy Mother Swamiji, he said, don't worry, you stay here. So he stayed in Trabuco for many years, until now he's in a old age home. Or actually right now I think he's back with his daughter has finally taken him in to care for him in his last days. But these things happen. And so Samadhi, this merchant, was turned out by his own family, his own children and wife, thrown out on the street with nothing. And so he and Surata, the king, start to talk. And the king is saying that I'm so worried about my kingdom. I don't know who is anyone feeding my royal elephant? Is anyone taking care of the horses? What about my family? And I'm even worried about the worthless people who threw me out. How are they doing? And then Samadhi says also that, yes, I can't stop worrying about my children and my wife, the very people who threw me out with nothing. I can't stop worrying about them. And I used to see that in this devotee also, who came and lived in Trabuco for many years. He used to worry a lot about his wife and daughter, the very people who had thrown him out. And even from in the monastery, when he had a little something, he would send to them, the very people who had thrown him out. And so these two together, Surata and Samadhi, they go to Medhas Muni, this great sage. And they tell him, why is it that this has happened to us? To me, the king speaks, and to me this has happened, and to this merchant, this other thing has happened, this tragic circumstances, and yet we can't stop worrying about the very people who ruined our lives. And so then Medhas Muni says, these things are common with the with the animals and the birds. They also are protective of their children. They also think day and night of their children. They also are constantly aware of the world around them. They also are trying to figure out how to get food, how to survive. All of these things are common. And that's because all are deluded by the power of Mahamaya. Mahamaya has deluded all. So that even when someone has betrayed you and tried to destroy you, you can't give up. You keep trying to figure out how to correct the situation, even though there's no hope for doing it. It's because of the delusive power of Mahamaya. And so he appeals to the need for non-attachment. And then they ask, what is this Mahamaya that you're speaking about? And so then he begins to tell the stories about Mahamaya in the form of Mother Durga. And he tells the story first of Madhu and Kaitaba, the demons Madhu and Kaitaba, who it's said in the story that Vishnu was asleep on the cosmic waters. Vishnu, God, the personal God, was asleep on the cosmic waters during the time of Pralaya. And so that sleeping on the cosmic waters is, the sleep of God is not like our sleep. The sleep of God is samadhi. And so Vishnu was lying in samadhi at a time of pralaya. And out of the dirt in his ears, the demons Kaitaba, yes, Madhu and Kaitaba were born out of the dirt in his ears. So that's again, we can't take these things in too philosophical a sense, but there is a philosophical meaning here. That is, when there is creation, there is dirt as well. Just as we have, we see in the world here, no matter how much we try to clean things, there's always some dirt somewhere. And so, in the dirt in Vishnu's ears, the Lord's ear, these two demons are born, and then they take over the world. And so the gods come to Vishnu and wake him up from his sleep, so that they pray to the Divine Mother, getting her, who is Yoga Nidra, the sleep of yoga, who is overpowering the eyes of Vishnu so that he sleeps on Sheshnag, he says sleeps on the serpent in the cosmic waters, so that Yoga Nidra will quit his eyes and Vishnu will wake up and can take care of the demons. And so in the first story, it's actually Vishnu who is awakened when Yoga Nidra, Mahamaya, the delusive power, which is keeping Vishnu asleep in samadhi, leaves and he wakes up, and then he is the one who kills these two demons. And so there's the beautiful hymn to the Devi. Verse, let's see, let me see if I can find that here. This is a very famous verse of Brahma singing to the Divine Mother. In introduction, it says, the king asked the sage, Surata asked the sage, Venerable Sir, who is that Devi whom you call Mahamaya? How did she come into being, and what is her sphere of action? What constitutes her nature? What is her form? Wherefrom did she originate? All that I wish to hear from you, O you supreme amongst the knowers of Brahman. This is not the hymn of Brahma, of course. But anyway, there he tells the story of Madhu and Kaitaba being born from the dirt in Vishnu's ears, and then Vishnu waking up when Yoga Nidra leaves. But then in chapter 2, there is the hymn about the Brahma's hymn to the Divine Mother. Oh, no, that's still in chapter 1, 72. Yes, here, from verse 73. So I'll just chant a couple of verses just to give the sound of the language, and then very briefly tell what the intent of the hymn is. Tvam swaha, tvam swadha, tvam hi vashatkara swaratmika, sudha tvam akshare nitye tridha matratmika stita. Ardhamatra stita nitya yanucharya visheshatah tvameva sa tvam savitri tvam deva janani para tvayaitat dharyate vishwam tvayaitat srijyate jagat tvayaitat palyate devi tvamatsyante cha sarvada. And it goes on like that. It says, you are Swaha and Swadha. Swaha and Swadha are two power words, mantras, which are said at the end of offerings. Swaha, when you make an offering to the gods, then you say Swaha. And Swadha to the forebears, to the ancestors, when you make offerings to the ancestors. And by uttering swaha at the end of an offering, or swadha at the end of an offering to the forebears, then it empowers the offering. And so you are swaha and swadha, meaning you are the power which empowers mantras. You are verily vashatkara, and the embodiment of swara. So Vashatkara is what is associated with the yajnas, the sacrificial rites in the Vedic times. And so you are the power of the Vedic sacrifices, and you are a swaratmika. That can mean two things. It can mean you are the essence of the heavenly world, swar, or it can mean more likely, because it's talking of mantras here, you are swaratmika, you are of the nature of sound itself, swara. You are the essence of meaningful sound. You are the meaning within sound, etc. And so you are nectar. O eternal and imperishable one, you are the embodiment of the threefold matra. Om, ma, the threefold matra of Om. By you, this universe is born, that is, carried. By you, this universe is created. By you, it is protected, O Devi, and you always consume it at the end. O you who are always of the form of the whole world, at the time of creation, you are of the form of the creative force. At the time of sustentation, that is the continuance of the universe, you are of the form of the protective power. And at the time of the dissolution of the world, you are of the form of the destructive power. You are the supreme knowledge as well as the great nescience, that is, you are vidya and avidya. You are knowledge as well as ignorance. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that there is the knowledge aspect of Maya, that which leads us back to God, and there's the ignorance aspect of Maya, that which leads us into delusion. And so you are the supreme knowledge as well as the great nescience. That again is a difficult idea for people to accept, that God is the cause of our delusion. God is the delusive power. But as I explained the other day in one of our classes, I believe it was in the gospel class, that if the divine being has become everything, then that means everything. We like to think that God is that which is good and benevolent, and then something else creates all of the bad things, but God creates all of the good things. No, God is everything. God is creation, God is destruction. God is illumination, and God manifests as delusion as well. God is freedom, mukti. God is bondage as well, bandhanam. Everything is the divine being. The purpose of this is not to say that God is both good and bad. No, God is beyond both. But when the divine manifests as this universe, everything has come out of God. So what is the result of our thinking that? If we can think that everything here is the manifestation of the divine being, then bondage is no more bondage. Then pain is no more pain. Then suffering is no more suffering. Then delusion is no more delusion. It becomes illumination. And so the ability to see everything as filled with the divine. Swami Vivekananda, when he was ill, very ill in Kashmir at one point, he said in ecstasy, he said, "Mother, you were the organ," meaning the organ of his body that was in extreme pain. "You were the organ and you were the pain." Seeing Mother, he was in the mood of worshiping Mother Kali. He said, "You are the pain itself," and saluting her as the intense pain that he was experiencing. And so again, that doesn't mean we seek pain. It doesn't mean that when we're in pain, we don't go to the doctor. No, we do. But there are pains, there are sufferings, there are tragedies in life that we can't avoid, even if we try to avoid them, as we naturally do. We can't. And if we can see everything is coming from God, then that transforms everything. Then we see the divine within everything. As Swami Ashokananda once said in a lecture, he said that anything, when it approaches the infinite, then it becomes bliss itself. So even pain, when it becomes infinite, even suffering, when it becomes infinite, it becomes bliss itself. So by you, this universe is born, etc. You are the supreme knowledge as well as this great nescience, the great intellect and contemplation, and as also the great delusion, the great goddess as well as the great asuri, the great demoness. So you are the primordial cause of everything, bringing into force the three gunas. You are the dark night of periodic dissolution. That is the dark night when within the larger cycle, there are minor periods of dissolution when the universe contracts and then comes back again. And then there's the period of great dissolution when everything in the whole universe disappears. So you are the dark night of periodic dissolution, that is the minor periods of pralaya. You are the great night of the final dissolution. And you are the terrible night of delusion. So again, addressing with devotion and in ecstasy, addressing the Divine Mother. You are the goddess of good fortune, the ruler. You are modesty, intelligence, characterized by knowledge, bashfulness, nourishment, contentment, tranquility, and forbearance. And whatever or wherever a thing exists, conscious or unconscious, whatever power all that possesses is yourself. Wherever anything exists, that is you, because you are existence itself. Everything, including us, we are manifestations of existence. We are, but we're a qualified existence. But you, O Divine Mother, you are existence itself. O you who are the soul of everything, how can I extol you more than this? By you, even he who creates, sustains, and devours the world is put to sleep. That is God. Even God, who creates the universe, protects the universe during its period of existence, and then consumes it at the end. You are the one who puts that deity to sleep. Again, she was the Yoga Nidra who put Vishnu to sleep, so that he was in samadhi, unaware of the universe, aware only of the infinite Brahman. Who is there capable of extolling you? Who is capable of praising you who have made all of us? Vishnu, myself, again, Brahma, the creator, is speaking, and Shiva. O Devi, being lauded thus, bewitch these two unassailable asuras, Madhu and Kaitaba, with your superior powers. And so then the hymn ends. And she withdraws from Vishnu, and Vishnu assumes his usual form, and then he takes Madhu and Kaitaba on his loins and cuts off their heads. And so that is the first story. And then the next story is about Mahishasura. And the worship of Mother Durga is that aspect of Durga that is worshipped. Mother Durga who slays Mahishasura, the demon with the head of a buffalo. And so you see in the image of Durga, as we have back here, you see Durga standing on this demon who has thrown off his buffalo head, and he's come out of his buffalo form in his asuric form, that is a anthropomorphic, human-like figure of the demon. And then there's this story. Let me read a little of this, the creation of Durga from all the other gods, because this is a beautiful story. So at this time, in the second story of Mahishasura, Mahishasura had taken charge of the universe. So you see from Vedic times, in the Vedic times, there were many battles between the Asuras and the Devas, but in the early Vedas, the Asuras were a class of Devas. In the early Vedas, the Asuras were not demons. They were the Asuras and the Devatas, and both were Devatas. Both were gods. But in time, the Asuras, which seem to have been identified with other tribes, non-Vedic tribes, then they were seen as the demons. And then later they became, the Asuras were demons. But one of the beautiful things in Hinduism is the demons are not like the devil in Western religion. The demons are beings like you and me, and they are redeemable. In fact, the demons have many great qualities. The main thing that makes a demon is their extreme egotism and pride, which causes them to use their power and their influence and even their virtues for selfish ends. But the demons themselves eventually will be liberated, because they are beings just like you and me, They too are manifestations of the divine reality. And so the demons are not the embodiment of evil. They're the embodiment of passions, uncontrolled passions, but oftentimes very focused passions. In fact, oftentimes they have yogic powers, spiritual powers, because of their great powers of concentration, because of their austerities, their tapasya that they have performed, but it's all in service of the ego, and so that's what distinguishes them from the gods. So the gods went to Shiva and Vishnu to tell them their plight, that they had been conquered by this Mahishasura who had taken over the universe, and to pray to them to vanquish Mahishasura, so that the universe could return to its proper form. And so then it says that after the Brahma and other gods told Shiva and Vishnu what had happened with Mahishasura taking over, then issued forth a great light from the face of Vishnu, who was full of intense anger hearing the story of Mahishasura taking over the universe, and from that of Brahma and Shiva too. So from the face of Vishnu, from the face of Shiva, from the face of Brahma, this intense light issued forth. From the bodies of Indra and other devas also sprang forth a very great light. And all this light unified together, united together, the light from these various deities united into one light. The devas saw there a concentration of light like a mountain blazing excessively. So again, all through the Hindu scriptures, you have this appeal to vastness. Our problem is that we are so small-minded. Swami Vivekananda once said with great pathos, great sadness, he said, "Man, the infinite dreamer, dreaming finite dreams." We're satisfied to dream of a little family, a little house, a little car. Let me get a little nicer car. Let me get a little job. Let me get this little nice thing. Let me get that little nice thing. Our problem is smallness. We're addicted to the small, to the insignificant. We like to lead a little insignificant life. Man, the infinite dreamer. And so the scriptures are always appealing to this sense of vastness. That doesn't mean that instead of dreaming about getting a Volkswagen, I should dream of getting a very big car. Instead of getting a little house, I should dream big and get a big house. No, those are also insignificant to dreams. And it doesn't mean that you shouldn't have a car or a house either. Of course, you need that to live. But it means that we shouldn't be caught by smallness. So again, the devas saw there with these lights coming from the faces of the gods, a concentration of light like a vast mountain blazing excessively, pervading all of the quarters with its flames. Then that unique light, produced from the bodies of all the gods, pervading the three worlds with its luster, combined into one and became a female form, the form of Mother Durga. By that which was Shiva's light, her face came into being. By Yama, the god of death, by his light, her hair. By Vishnu's light, her arms, and by Chandra's light, her two breasts. By Indra's light, her waist. By Varuna's light, her shanks and thighs, and by Earth's light, her hips. By Brahma's light, her feet came into being. By Surya, the sun, by his light, her toes. By the 8 Vasus, her fingers came into being. By Kubera, the god of wealth, her nose. By Prajapati, the creator, her teeth came into being. And similarly, by Agni, the god of fire, from his light, her 3 eyes were formed. The light of Vayu, her ears. The light of the 2 Sandhyas, the morning and evening, her eyebrows were formed. The manifestation of the lights of other devas too contributed to the being of this auspicious goddess. Then looking at her who had come into being from the assembled lights of all of the gods, the immortals who were oppressed by Mahishasura experienced joy. The bearer of the Pinaka, Shiva, Pinakadhari, the bearer of the trident, drawing forth a trident from his own trident, presented it to her. Vishnu, bringing forth a discus out of his own discus, gave that to her. Varuna gave her a conch, Agni a spear, and Maruta gave a bow as well as 2 quivers full of arrows. Indra, Lord of Devas, bringing forth a thunderbolt out of his own thunderbolt, and a bell from that of his elephant, Airavata, and so forth. He goes on describing all of the gifts that were given by all of the gods, the major gods, the minor gods, by the milk ocean of nectar, giving her various jewels and ornaments, the god, Lord of wealth, and so forth. The earth quaked and all the mountains rocked. Victory to you, Jaya, Jaya, exclaimed the Devas, and joy to her, the rider of the lion. So the lion in the image of Durga, each Hindu deity has a vahana, a carrier, a vehicle. And so the vehicle of Durga is the lion. She stands on the lion. But the lion represents the jiva, each one of us. That if we become the devotees of Mother Durga, then we are the bearers of Mother Durga. And we attain to the strength of lions. And so then she enters into battle with Mahishasura. And the story of the battle is itself extremely dynamic. So again, the purpose of this, when you read the story of the battle, we in our timidity, we may read the hymns of praise extolling the goddess and say, oh, that's so beautiful. She's eternal. She's changeless. She's the power of everything. She's the cosmic energy. But the battles we don't like so much. But no, if we read that again, the idea is what the effect left over after you read it is. And so when you read about this battle with millions of elephants and hundreds of thousands of horses and billions of chariots, hundreds of kotis, which comes into the billions of chariots, and all of the forces of Mahishasura casting their spears and their arrows, and the goddess fighting off all of them, and finally slaying Mahishasura. So again, you get the feeling that the Mother Durga, she is invincible. She's invincible. She's the power of everything. She's the one who is capable of everything, for whom there are no obstacles too big for her to vanquish. And so in our little lives, when we face obstacles, we can pray to her and know that if it is in our interest, if we pray to her, if it's in our interest, she will remove the obstacles. If she doesn't remove the obstacles, it's because it's not yet in our interest for them to be removed. It's something we need to struggle against, to struggle with, to experience in order for our own inner purification. And so then in the chapter 4, there's a beautiful hymn of Indra and the other gods to the goddess. I won't go into that because time is up now. But then next, the Mathas Muni tells the king and the merchant the story of Shumbha and Nishumbha, two other demons. And there's the famous hymn of the Devas. I'll take a little extra time today because there's some things that I can't skip without doing injustice to the text. And so this is a very famous hymn in chapter 5. All of you will recognize when we come to a part of it. But it begins when the Deva Uchuhu, the gods said, or actually they sang, Namo Devyai Mahadevyai Shivayai Satatam Namaha Namah Prakrityai Bhadrayai Niyata Pranatasmatam Raudrayai Namo Nityayai Gauryai Dhatriyai Namo Namaha Jyotsnayai Chendurupinyai Sukhayai Satatam Namaha Kalyanyai Pranata Vridhyai Siddhyai Kurmo Namo Namaha Nairutyai Bhubhritam Lakshmyai Sharvanyai Te Namo Namaha. And it goes on until we come to the part that's very famous. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Vishnu Mayeti Shabdita Namastasye, 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 namo namaha. Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Chaitanyabhidhiyate Namastasye, 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 Namo Namaha. And it continues like that. So this says, salutations to the goddess, to the great goddess, Mahadevi. Salutation always to her who is ever auspicious. Salutation to her who is the primordial cause and the sustaining power. With attention we have made obeisance to her. That is, mindfully, with full concentration, we pay our respects to her. And here it says, she who is all auspicious. Again, that's significant because, yes, she is the great delusion. But if we see her behind even the great delusion, we see that she is the Divine Mother, the all-loving, all-auspicious, all-beneficent Divine Mother, even as the source of the great delusion. Salutations to her who is terrible, to her who is eternal. So she is terror itself, and she's eternal. Salutations to Gauri, the supporter of the universe. Gauri, one of the names of the Divine Mother, referring to her with a white complexion. Here she has a golden complexion, but she's also Gauri. Salutation always to her who is of the form of the moon and moonlight and happiness itself. We bow to her who is welfare. We make salutations to her who is prosperity and success. Salutation to the consort of Shiva, who is herself the good fortune, as well as the misfortune of kings. Again, pertinent to Surata, to whom the story is being told. Salutations always to Durga, who takes one across in difficulties, who in his essence, who is the essence of everything. As, in fact, there are other places here, and in fact, it'll come in a moment, one of the places, like in the Gita, where it said that the Divine Mother is the essence of everything. So in chapter 7, 8, and 9 in the Gita, Sri Krishna talks about himself being the essence of everything. Salutations to Durga, who takes one across difficulties, who is essence, who is the author of everything, who is knowledge of discrimination, and who is blue-black as also smoke-like in complexion. So she's Gauri, who is white, she's golden, she's smoke-black, and she is dark-black. We prostrate before her who is at once most gentle and most terrible. We salute her again and again. Salutations to her who is the support of the world. Salutations to the Devi who is of the form of will, volition. Salutations again and again to the goddess who in all beings is called Vishnu Maya, the creative power and the delusive power of Vishnu within all beings. Salutations again and again to the goddess who abides in all beings as consciousness. And then begins this series where she is in the form, dwells in all beings in the form of intelligence, in the form of sleep, nidra. She dwells in all beings as sleep. She dwells in all beings as hunger and as thirst. She is hunger and thirst. When we feel hunger and feel thirst, that is her, again, because she is the essence, the inner import of everything. She who is in the form of reflection, in the form of power, Shakti, who is in the form of forgiveness, who is in the form of classification, who is in the form of modesty, who is in the form of peace, Shanti, who is in the form of Shraddha, faith, who is in the form of loveliness, and who is in the form of good fortune, to the Devi who abides in all beings in the form of activity, in the form of memory, in the form of compassion and contentment, in the form of Matri Rupena, in the form of mother, in the form of error, that is Bhranti Rupena. I knew a worker in Belur Math who I used to always, in order to practice my Bengali at Belur Math, I would often talk to the workers because they're non-judgmental and don't mind if you make mistakes because they don't know good grammar either. And so I would always talk to the workers and to the beggars on the street and people. And it probably shows in my Bengali also. So I asked this one worker, "What is your name?" And he said, "Bhranti Kumar." Bhranti Kumar. Then I remembered that there's a tradition that in a family, if they lost to one or more children, then there was the belief that it's because the child was wanted by the gods. They took the child back to themselves. So if we name them an ugly name, then the gods will leave them alone. Oh, we don't, what are we going to do with Bhranti Kumar? So let him be. So yes, but that is the Divine Mother. She's in the form of error as well, who presides over the senses of all beings and governs all the elements and so forth. And so on, the beautiful hymn goes. So now I'll have to come to a conclusion. So she eventually kills Shumba and Nishumba. Oh, there's one part I can't not allude to also, because it is important. Let's see if I can find if this is what I've marked. No, that's not it. It was before that. Okay, here we go. A messenger comes. A messenger comes from Shumba and Nishumba. Because they have been told that the goddess is the most beautiful being that has ever been seen. Never has there been such a beautiful woman as this who has appeared, which was, of course, Durga, but they didn't know that. But said the most beautiful woman that you've ever seen, and so Shumba, the Asura, he said, "Go and tell her, thus in my tell her that she may quickly come to me in love. Tell her in such a way that she'll come to me in love." And so the messenger goes to the Devi and tells her that Shumba, Lord of the Asuras, is the supreme sovereign of the three worlds. Sent by him as messenger, I have come here to your presence. Hearken to what has been said by him whose command is never resisted among the devas, and who has vanquished all the foes of the demons. He says, all the three worlds are mine, and the devas are obedient to me. The gods are obedient to me. I enjoy all of their shares in sacrifice, all of the choicest gems in the three worlds. And he goes on saying how he is the possessor of all of the finest treasures in the whole universe. And all of that will be yours if you come to me. And so then finally, the Devi said to the messenger, you have spoken the truth. Nothing false has been uttered by you. That is giving encouragement to this messenger of Shumba, the demon. Shumba is indeed the sovereign of the three worlds, and likewise also is Nishumba. But in this matter, how can that which has been promised be made false? Hear what promise I made out of foolishness. So here she is responding in a way to trick the demons, but in such a coy way that that's why I wanted to read it. It's so beautiful. He who conquers me in battle removes my pride, and is my match in strength in the world. And he who removes my pride and is my match in strength in the world shall be my husband. So let Shumba come here, or Nishumba, the great Asura. Vanquishing me here, let him soon take my hand in marriage. Why delay? And so the messenger tries to argue against, saying that no one can stand before my master Shumba, nor in front of Nishumba. And she says, no, but what can I do? I gave this promise. The only way I'm going to give my hand in marriage is to the one who can defeat me in battle. So then Shumba and Nishumba come to defeat her in battle, and so then the great battle begins, and they're finally defeated. And so in conclusion, at the end of the text, then there's a beautiful passages where the demons are defeated, but it's said that in defeat, the goddess gives liberation to the demons. That the Devi does nothing out of anger, she does nothing out of hatred, she does nothing out of her revenge. That the death at the hands of the goddess is liberation. Death at the hands of the goddess is liberation, enlightenment, freedom, eternal blessedness. And so the demons are granted liberation through the battle with the goddess. And so that is that's part of the idea within Hinduism, that the quick way to realize God is to be the enemy of God. The problem is that we don't have that much anger that we can sustain it and actually fight as the demons fought with the goddess, or as Kamsa fought with Krishna, or as Ravana fought with Rama. But if we had that much power, then the quickest way to attain to God would be to be the enemy of God, because in being slain by God, we would be liberated. So again, it's not saying that we should all practice being angry with God and go home and try practicing that, because we don't have the power to do that. So for us, the better way is supplication, prayer, meditation, loving devotion, worship, etc. But that idea that again, it's not that the mother is not fighting them in anger. She's fighting them and granting them liberation. And so then at the very end, the Suratha and Samadhi, the king and the merchant, they practiced austerities and meditation for 3 years. And at the end of that meditation, after being instructed by Medhas Muni, the sage, they have the vision of the goddess, and she tells them, ask me a boon. And so Suratha says that he wants kingdom. He was the king who had lost his kingdom. Again, at the beginning of the story, he wants kingdom. And so she says, you in the 8th Manvantara, the 8th period of billions of years of the 8th Manu, you will be the Manu of that period, known as Savarni. And then Samadhi, she asks him what he wants, and he wants liberation. So that's another beautiful thing in the Chandi, that you see the king, who is a Kshatriya, a higher caste, he still wants kingdom, and he's granted kingdom. So he gets what he wants, but he gets it in a grand way. He becomes the Manu for a whole age, the illustrious and illumined sage Manu. But Samadhi, the Vaishya, who's a mere merchant, buying and selling. That's what he does for a living. But he has the greater wisdom. He asks for liberation. And so he attains to liberation by the grace of the goddess. And so ends the Chandi. So it's a wonderful story. And again, it's a story which at first you think, well, this is not like other scriptures. It's not like the Gita, which has so many teachings, so many things like that. But no, the effect of the Gita is to bring heroic strength, to bring devotion, and to expand the mind, to make the mind seek that which is large. Nalpe sukhamasti, the Chandogya Upanishad says. In the small, there is no happiness in the small. Bhumaiva sukham. The infinite alone is happiness. And so in various ways, the Chandi expands the mind and makes us ready to seek the infinite, not to seek the small. So with that, I will close for today's talk. Let me give announcements, and because I've gone so long over time, I won't take questions today. I apologize for that. I like to leave time for question and answer. But a subject like this, I couldn't do justice to by cutting it short in the middle. So even this, I could have spoken about the Chandi for a couple of more hours easily. But time is limited. So I won't take time for questions, but I will give announcements and then a closing prayer. So announcements, on Tuesday, we will have the usual Katha Upanishad class at 7:30, which will be live streamed. On Thursday at 11 o'clock in the morning, we will have the usual Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna class, live streamed also. And on Saturday, October 9th, we will have our Durga Puja. It will be here in the hall. Because of the pandemic, we're not having a pandal outside, a tent outside with the image, and 700, 800 people coming because of the pandemic. We hope to be able to do that next year. We had hoped to do it this year. We waited until late August to make the final decision, but it became obvious in August that we couldn't do the large Durga Puja. So it will be here. Only those who are directly, the volunteers who are directly helping with the worship itself will be allowed during the time of the puja. But like this lecture, it will be live streamed over YouTube. So you can watch it at home on any streaming device. And then at the end of the puja, by 12:15, people can come here. And one family unit at a time will be allowed to come in to see the image, have darshan, to prostrate to the image, to make pushpanjali, to offer flowers, and to receive prasad. So we invite all of you to come after the puja is over, after 12:15, and one by one. So from 12:15 till 1:30 or later, but 1:30 certainly, people will be allowed to come. So if you want to avoid the rush at the beginning and come later, that's fine. But from 12:15 till at least 1:30, people will be allowed to come in, have darshan, offer flower, and receive prasad. So we invite all of you to come. To share in Durga Puja, because a puja, especially a big celebration like this, is not complete until prasad has been served to devotees. So with that, I will end and close with a chant. Om madhuvatartayate madhuksharanti sindhavaha madhvirnasantoshadhihi madhunaktamutoshasi madhumatparthivagum rajaha madhudyaurastu nah pita madhumandho vanaspatir madhumagum astu suryaha madhvirgavo bhavandunaha. Om madhu, om madhu, om madhu. For us who seek the truth, and for all living beings, may the winds blow sweetly, may the rivers flow sweetly, may the herbs yield us sweetness. Sweet be the night and the break of day. Sweet be the very dust of the earth. May the heavens pour down sweetness upon us. May the trees, lords of the forest, bear us sweetness. May the sun shed its sweetness upon us. May all the directions pour forth sweetness. Om, sweetness, sweetness, sweetness.